Helping salespeople achieve their dreams is on Ed Armishaw's LinkedIn bio. And if those dreams look like achieving large enterprise deals, then you have to listen to this episode. Previously at Salesforce for just under 6 years, Ed now leads a team at ServiceNow. And aside from the day job, he also has an incredible personal brand that posts regular sales content, so I urge you to head over to his LinkedIn profile. Today's episode, though, is big deal hunting, where we talk through Ed's framework on full cookie, not crumbs, how to be the general of your army, starting with power, holding the line, creating a virtual team, executing mutual success plans, and why you should treat the sell as a theatre. This is one of the most actionable conversations I've had, so I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. So you're really passionate about these big deals. Why is it, as you say, full cookie, not crumbs?
Full cookie, not crumbs. Before we dive into the various different cookies and biscuits that I'm sure we're going to talk about today, the whole concept of full cookie, not crumbs starts with belief. One of the things that I think that I've noticed and think I've seen over the years is you kind of get two types of sellers. You get those that get caught with kind of listening to the corporate rhetoric around what it is they should do. So back in the olden days, it used to be about product, feature, function, all that sort of stuff, and would therefore sell accordingly. And then you get the types of sellers, and typically it's a bit less. It's maybe 10, 15% of people in an organization who just want to break the rule book and want to figure out ways to challenge, push boundaries, grow bigger. And to do big deals, you absolutely have to have the mindset of the former, of the latter, not the former. You have to believe, because most SaaS companies, and we're talking SaaS here, I'm going to talk mostly about software sales rather than, there's lots of other different ways of doing big deals. But most SaaS companies build a very repeatable sales motion for their salespeople, which allows them to deliver a quarterly driven or annual at best driven plan. Sometimes big deal hunting completely breaks that motion. And actually, if you're going to do it properly, you probably do need to break that motion, because an organization doesn't need lots and lots they do need lots and lots of big deals, but typically don't build a motion for that because it doesn't fit with some of the financial constraints that they might be hit by, reporting to the markets, etc. So you have to have a mindset, and you have to believe that you can help your customer or your customers, depending on how many you're working with, or your prospects, change not just the way that they work today, but actually transform perhaps the type of organization they are. You have to go and have share price impacting conversations for your customer share price impacting conversations. That's where it starts. So you have to believe you can do that. If you don't, you're kind of starting from a position where you're never going to be able to do the biggest deals. It then comes onto this whole concept of full cookie, not crumbs. So if you take that idea of belief, well, full cookie is about being able to see the biggest picture possible. It's about being able to go and talk about the biggest opportunity that you can see for your customer to transform their organization. The crumbs is kind of what we all get a bit caught with, which is the kind of, and we all know, those of us that have been selling for a long time, you can spin the wheels and do just as much work on some of the smaller deals, the crumbs, as you would do on the really big stuff. So, I talk a lot to my team at the moment at ServiceNow about, we have ambitions to do really, really big deals, like 10, 15, 20 million plus, which is amazing. I love talking about this stuff. But if you were to break down, my maths is probably going to come, my bad maths will come through here, but if you were to break down a $10 million deal into the days that you work in a year and then the hours in your working day, and you only focused on that, so you did nothing else, you did no email, you did no slacking or teamsing, you did nothing other than focus on this opportunity, your hourly rate would be $38,000 an hour.
I'm not even going to
question
get there, right? Whether
the maths,
that is
I think,
right.
are right. Around there, $40,000
I'm bad at maths too, and I'm not going to get my calculator out, so don't worry, we'll trust you.
So if you then think about, well, it's about focus, right? It's about getting in. You can spend lots and lots of that time on the crumbs, and lots of people do, lots of companies do, and that's absolutely fine if you want to do it, but it's better to go and shoot for the bigger cookie, because it's the classic, but you can shoot big and you'll still have the crumbs there because they will still exist. So it's about balancing tactical and strategic conversations at all times, but you have to have the strategic vision, the big ambition, the dream big, whatever you want to call it. Otherwise you're never going to be able to realize that dream. And that's about believing that your organization, that you can learn your customer well enough to figure out something about the way they work or about how they work with their customers or the way they work with their employees, or whatever it is, that can completely change the game, that will be share price impacting for them, and you can fix it. And it's only at that point that you can start to build your really, really big deal promise to them.
Do you think the full cookie is for everyone though?
Good question. It's for every salesperson to think like that, absolutely, if they want to. It does. There is an element of what you sell in it. So, but I think everyone should look to maximize the opportunities they have. I've been very fortunate over the last sort of 7 or 8 years of my career. I've been working with platform organizations. So I worked at Salesforce for 6 years now, work at ServiceNow, both incredible platforms that can really transform across both front and back office in both cases for our customers. But it's a mindset. Full cookie can be, as we're talking today about 7 and 8 figure deals, that can be your full cookie. But if actually, the average ticket price of what you're selling, say 10 grand, full cookie could be 100 grand. It doesn't matter what what you're selling. It's the attitude that you take to it and the way that you think about approaching it. It's about focusing your time. It's about finding those opportunities to help your customer change the game.
And I think it is all just about maximizing that full potential, isn't it? And like not settling. And we had a stand up this week, and one of our team said, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, so apologies to any Game of Thrones fans out there, but apparently there's a line that says "hold the line," where it's hold the line. That was my really bad impression of whoever said that. I have no idea, so I don't know what voice they sound.
I can vaguely remember that
something,
scene.
And they showed like a gif of it, and I went straight over my head because I didn't understand the reference. But I loved what they said about holding the line, staying strong, understanding your value. Do you think that sometimes can be quite scary for people that are going for these larger deals? Yeah. It's very easy to probably go, oh my goodness, I am just about to get this much money or close this huge deal. I'm just going to pander to it and not hold my line, not stay strong. And you've mentioned mindset there, and I imagine a lot of it is down to mindset. But how would you advise people to be able to stay calm and
it's conviction.
Stay strong?
It's conviction, Izzy. So it goes back to what we talked about knowing that what you're doing, knowing that the conversation that you're having, knowing that the problem you're fixing is one that genuinely will, and you have to believe this, right? It goes back to belief. You almost be evangelical about it with them, knowing that what you're going to do is going to impact very, very positively their bottom, top line, whatever it is, right? That it's going to drive share price impacting change. We are talking about senior executive level conversations here. I'm sure we'll kind of allude to some of the examples through my career as we go along, but when I hear "hold the line," I don't think Game of Thrones.
Why? That's weird.
Well, I'm just a bit older than you, and I remember the song by Toto. But anyway,
right.
When I hear "hold the line," what I think about is the conviction around pricing. So, I landed a significant multi-million new logo at Salesforce with a UK grocer, and we never changed our pricing to the customer. We did not discount once from the first proposal, not once. And I remember at the time, quite a few of our senior executives were kind of going, what can we do to bring the deal in quicker, blah, 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 blah. Like, how do we accelerate this? And the answer back was, I have the conviction to hold the line here. No, we are not going to. This is going to drive huge impact for their organization. It was for solving a massive problem that they hadn't figured out how to solve and did go on to do that, which is really cool. And therefore we were able to hold our line on that. Well, I knew that it was the right thing to do. And actually, it came in, roughly when we said it was going to, which is good. And we delivered that. And I think one of the things that's very easy to do as a seller, and I've seen lots and lots of people do this, is try and drive a compelling event out of commercials. One of the big changes that's happened is that we're actually now all facilitating buying. We're not selling. And the reality is, as soon as you offer a lower price, they're going to expect that regardless of whether it goes through your end of quarter or your end of year or whatever it is. So holding the line is an interesting one because it's something that I talk about quite a bit with. I'm lucky to work with lots of very experienced sellers now, and they're all already doing it. But certainly when I've worked with younger sellers coming up through, it's something that kind of almost gets drummed into them of like, oh, you have to discount to get it done. It's like, no, you don't. You have to build the value for the customer and then be really strong in your conviction you can help.
I love that you use it too. We're on the right track.
Yep.
We're obviously talking about
Absolutely.
the right things. And you mentioned, Ed, at the beginning that you really need to like get in under the depths and under the skin of your customer and understand them. And one of the things that we've spoken about before is building an internal team. I'm guessing you don't mean building a virtual team, wasn't it? Virtual internal team. So you're not talking about building a remote team at ServiceNow. You're meaning implementing that within your customer. Yeah. How do you do that?
It's about leading without authority. So I'm now in a position where I lead a team. I have a group of people that work for me. When I was in AE roles, I saw my role slightly differently to quite a few of the other AEs across the organizations that I worked in. I firmly believe that selling is a team sport, and your competition as an AE is not actually the other technology companies that looks and sounds a bit like you, right? They might sell the same sort of widgets that you sell, those types of things. People always think about competition in those terms. I always thought about competition as the other people in my organization who did the same job as me, who could utilize the resource that I needed. So my whole game was, how do I get an unfair share of the resource around me? How do I get the best possible solution engineers, solution sales specialists, business value consultants, execs? It doesn't matter. You name the different people that can be in a win team. It's huge. How do I get them around me? How do I get them helping me in my pursuit? How do I make my success their success? How do I make it a shared mission? Because when you do that, one, wisdom of crowds comes in. You bring in different experiences. It always changes the conversation. You get different things coming in. And just more importantly, you're then not alone. This is you go from being that kind of lone figurehead, the striker running around up front on their own, to being actually the quarterback who's just saying, I've just mixed two sports references there, that's never good, to being the coach, to being the coach that sits there, to being the coach that sits at the back of the back and watches and orchestrates and figures out how people are going to go and do. And I think that's definitely a shift that we need to see more of in enterprise selling, which is people moving from the traditional, I've got to know loads about my offering, my product, my platform, my service, whatever it is they're selling, and move towards people who can play the role of leader, who can be strategic and paint a vision that people can then come and get behind, and then set structure and accountability and ways of working that then allow their virtual team to go to market for them. Because if you're going to go and take on, I went from working with enterprise accounts, so I had a patch of like 10 accounts, really only sold to like 2 or 3 of them. But anyway, don't tell my previous leaders that.
You've just told everyone
yeah,
that.
There you go. It's fine. It's in the past. And
you're not bitter about it at all.
No, it's fine. Quite open about it. I was just like, fine. I did the deals I needed to do. We did some huge lands because I knew I had to focus, right? So if you've got 10 accounts in your patch or 50 accounts in your patch, whatever, you can either spend your whole time kind of spinning the wheels trying to do the whole activity-led sales thing, which just doesn't work these days, or you can get focused. Once you get focused, you can then build a virtual team that can come and help you. And that's how you then start to broaden out the conversations you have with an organization. So I talk in terms of pursuits. So I would sit down at the start of the year, I would do a whole bunch of research. I'm not going to tell you all the best way to go and do research. Watch Sarah's episode, listen to her pod, because she goes really deep on that, which is amazing. One of the things she does incredibly well. But, annual reports, understand the customer, voice of customer, get to know them get to know them so well you could get a job there, basically. Once you've done that, you build the point of view. I am a student of Challenger Sale. I know it's getting on a bit now, but like that book, that whole Challenger movement, Challenger Customer, Challenger Sale, and now more recently the Jolt Effect are the 3 books I would recommend any and every salesperson reads, because they are brilliant. You build that point of view that says, I can help X organization grow, scale, save money, drive efficiency, do whatever it is, share price impacting projects. And then from there, you build your pursuits. Here are the 4 things that I want this account team that we are now taking to market with this customer to go and do. And then it's amazing, because once you've got the people excited about working with you, once you've given them the strategy and the direction and the things to go and say, you can then take a slight step back and watch them go and do their magic. What's better than multiplying through a huge group of people compared to trying to plow a lone furrow and probably getting a bit lonely and a bit tired and only ever being able to do so much. That also, by the way, is a real seminal read for me, Multipliers by it's Liz Wiseman. That's amazing. It taught me how to delegate, taught me that actually I didn't have to be strong in all areas. I could find people around me to help cover my weaknesses and elevate their strengths, which was amazing. And once you've done that, once you've built this virtual team, then it's then about keeping track of the key moments in the year. So somebody asked me the other day, how do you see the calendar year when you visualize it in your head? And they were like, I see it as a list, January through to December. Well, I see it side to side in quarters. Funny that, eh? And because I've been doing this for 18, 20 years. And I always think about like, okay, Q1's for prep and for POV build. Q2's for like land the message, get the feedback. Q3's for validate the sale. Q4's for go big and contract, right? That's how I've always worked. Sometimes you might have to work 6 quarters because actually you're building a really, really big conversation. I'm absolutely obsessed. My new boss at ServiceNow, I joined ServiceNow relatively recently, has introduced me to the Gartner model around horizons. So building horizons with your customer, which I think is awesome. I wish I knew that as an AE because that's amazing. What is that? I've not heard of it. It's the idea of don't just start with one POV, actually have a really big POV and then work back. So it's like it's showing them the path to transformation, which I think is genius. Gartner use it a lot. It's really good. And I've got AEs that are doing it brilliantly at the moment. It's so cool to see, especially as we're closing the deals. But what it does then is it gives you this roadmap. So actually you're not working quarter to quarter or year to year once you do this. You're working sometimes 3, sometimes 5 years out on these programs. And, that can sound scary to AEs, particularly if they're used to working in a quarterly driven business. But the reality is, who doesn't want to do the hard legwork and then know 3 to 5 years out what's coming? I mean, that's really exciting. And you can either do one big, huge, massive deal with a company. That would be lovely. Don't get me wrong, but there's always a bigger deal to do. So is there not ways you could build like a program of them moving forwards? And that's that whole concept of like, okay, if we change, I don't know, let's take customer experience. We might start in like one area of your business and transform the customer experience there. That might be worth, I don't know, low 7-figure deal, but actually that's just the proof point for then going and doing the full cookie, which might be, the whole of the customer experience across an organization. But actually that's just Horizon 2. Horizon 3 could be, we're then going to branch out and start doing, customer experience throughout the world or give that as a random example, but there's so many of them.
There's
right?
more to unpack, yeah,
loads. Absolutely,
it's really interesting as you're speaking because obviously when I first initially asked the question of the internal team, to my misunderstanding, I thought you meant build an internal team within your customers' team.
Not even talking about the customer engagement yet.
No, we've not even got there.
This is about bringing your army to bear.
Yeah, of course.
And becoming the general. It's a horrible analogy. I don't like war, but
it makes so much sense.
Probably the closest one, or being a quarterback of the team around you. So that then you're multiplying the conversation into your customer, because we'll talk about the customer bit, I guess, as we come on.
Yeah, because I was going to say there's a whole different conversation there to build like an internal team with your customer.
There is. And that's kind of then where we end up going, right? Yeah. So if you then think the concept of finding mobilizers, champions mobilizers, they get intertwined. I prefer mobilizers just because it's from challenger customer really. And the big difference there is that mobilizers are people within your organization, within your customer's organization who see some of the same challenges, can validate the challenges that you're seeing and want to change them. Because a champion may not want to change them or may not have the clout to fully change them sometimes. But if you think now the average buying committee is what? There's various different reports, 8 to 12 people for enterprise level software deals. That's kind of 200 grand and up, I think. With buyers that are far, far, far better educated than they were when I started this gig in the early noughties, back in the last recession.
God, you've been through too.
I know.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm fine. Do you need
a hug?
No, I'm fine. But seriously, right, like the buying landscape's changed. So therefore, multi-threading, as it gets called, becomes really important, which is just having lots of conversations and validating constantly across an organization. Again, going back to it, if I've got a team that's working on a client, it makes it much easier to validate. It makes it much easier to sell stories, to tell stories, sorry. And it makes it much easier to elicit feedback on what's going right and what's going wrong.
I think that's so important because AEs often just see it from the new deal perspective, but don't actually fully get into the grips of, right, what of their software is working? Where do we need to improve? Correct. How can we build this into the business case with the buyer so that you can get the most out of it and also make sure that they are renewing and staying as a customer and you can upsell in different areas.
Correct. And I always, I come from my own experience, big deal selling in new logos. I was to use the old analogy, always a hunter. I love building things. I always have. It's just like, it's ironic because I'm terrible at DIY, but like I love building things at work.
Which is funny because you said your son likes building things too.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, it's an interesting
He's
one.
obviously taking after
He
you.
has, which is good. But what you just described there is really interesting because it's about not just letting go once the contract is signed, right? I've talked about this quite a bit in the past on in lots of different conversations like this. People talk about mutual close plans. You talk about execution, right? You say you've gone all the way through the year and you're in that lovely kind of executing phase in the final quarter. And people go, oh, have you got a mutual close plan? And I must have said the following a million times. We're not calling it a mutual close plan. It's a mutual success plan. And they look at me a bit funny and I go, well, the customer's project starts when they sign that piece of paper. Yes, you recognize the revenue and probably that's where you then get your bonus in most organizations. You get paid your commission. But actually the customer is just getting started at that point. So your mutual success plan should not finish the day that the customer signs. Actually, it really should start. And if you then countenance as such, you then go into the implementation or you go into the adoption phase or whatever it is. It depends where you are in the customer's life cycle with you. But you at that point, it is where the program starts, and you then do take a success mindset. We talked in our briefing call about kind of using the how, right? One of the things I learned at Salesforce, the hard way, by the way, was
I want to hear these stories.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you the stories. Was to lead with how. So, and these things are always that you always learn as you go along, right? But I delivered my first ever sale there was 9 months into my time at Salesforce. It was a multi-million new logo, relatively well heralded from a bunch of people. It's like big deals always catch attention. And I sold it without an implementation partner. I've got no clue how we as a team did that. Genuinely no clue. I've never seen it done since and it not go wrong. It somehow didn't. But they chose the implementation partner 6 months after they did the deal with us.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I would never advise anyone do that nowadays. We wouldn't let anyone do that in my current role in ServiceNow. It just wouldn't happen. This was back in Salesforce times. But I learned from that. So then the next one, I was like, that didn't feel right. So the next one we were, probably did the more atypical software sales thing of kind of involved the implementation team about halfway through once we'd validated what we were, trying to sell them. And that worked okay. My last really, really big deal at Salesforce, the first ever meeting we had with a client, I took a customer success manager and one of the professional services team because I knew that we needed to treat it like a project and a program, not like a sale, because it was really big. It was solving a business critical challenge for this grocer and it had to go right from the off. And the best way of building trust is not to talk about widgets and features and functions. It's to talk about projects and programs. It's to talk about deliverables and outcomes. And yeah, I can do that, but it sounds a hell of a lot more credible coming from, a customer success leader or from a professional services leader who they know that they can rely on to deliver.
I love that approach because they could get such buy-in to you and think, oh, we love Ed, we want to work with him. But then once
occasionally people say that, very occasionally.
All the time. And then when you leave, they're like, oh, where's he gone? And maybe they've not got that buy-in with the team. And there's so much that we talk about and we could do a whole other episode, I'm sure, of like the handover and making sure that that's seamless because then that's really where you lose the success of the whole project. So I think seeing it as that mutual success plan is so important.
It absolutely is. And this whole concept of mutual success is about value realization as well. So if you go back right the way to the start where we talked about POVs, I would always advise a POV isn't we can fix X, Y, and Z. It's here are some problems that we've spotted across your organization. They may be known to the executive team, but just too difficult to fix. That happens. Or they're unknown and therefore they haven't fixed them, right? Your whole hypothesis should firstly present the challenges, present what you think is the scale of the challenges, and then present how you can fix them and what the return on fixing them could be in whichever way. So that could be, we're talking business case from the start. If you go with a business case from the start, they might believe you. If you go telling them some problems they already know they've got, they might buy into you. They might kind of think, okay, this person's understood the business. If you go saying, here's the problem we've seen, here's how we can fix it, here's how quickly that will return. Oh, and by the way, here's whoever, Bob and Jane that I've brought along who are going to help. It's not Bob and Jane, is it? Whoever, your team.
Izzy.
Exactly. Here's Izzy. That works.
Literally
Here's
right
Izzy, who is the customer success director, who's going to be working on your account for the next 3 years, making sure your team becomes super fans, so they adopt really quickly, and therefore, you get that value that we've talked about faster. You know which conversation you want to have,
better.
right? Yeah, and learning that the hard way was the best way, because it's now something that's really ingrained. So when we talk about going with that hypothesis, yes, lead with stats, figures, but also lead with how. How I am going to fix your problem, how I am going to make this successful. Because every single buyer you're talking to, whether they are at the exec level, the CIO, CEO, CMO, CRO, CHRO, name all the Cs, CPO, CISO, all of them, they all have multiple other technology companies coming to try and sell stuff to them, right? Coming to try and run projects for them. They will work with the ones that they believe will actually deliver and move the needle for them. So if you're not talking in those terms, there's no point in talking.
And probably the ones that is the least heavy lifting for them, that is just going to be able to take it off their plate.
I mean,
worry.
Going back to that beautiful quadrant of known, unknown, scaled, not scaled, that whole piece. There's a good chance most of the biggest problems that I've solved over the years have been known problems. They have known it's an issue, they've just not known how to solve it. Therefore, if you can do that, if you can help them understand, I don't know, the one that we did with the grocer was during the pandemic, right? And it was that fun time we all had where we were locked down, and you could only fun time.
It's great.
I had a 3-year-old. It was brilliant. Who couldn't go to nursery, and my wife and I both have very busy jobs. It was great, but that time where we would get grocery delivered from the grocer we would never normally shop with, and we'd get the delivery at 11 o'clock at night, and they'd send their own brand toilet roll, and we'd be absolutely fucking over the moon to get it, because there was just total sparsity, right? There was like 4 grocers that could deliver, the rest couldn't. You just get what you take and you'd be delighted. Very short window. Well, we knew that this particular grocer was in that position. They were one that could win a load of customer share really quickly, because the grocery market is a bit of a pizza or a cake market, right? It's all about shares. It doesn't grow that much. And we knew that they had this opportunity to take advantage of this. They'd won a load of customers. How do you keep them was the question. I knew their board would be discussing this. I would be discussing it if I was in their board. Use a bit of empathy, use a bit of common sense. It's going to be a C-level agenda, because you've got this huge opportunity to grab and keep that an unfair share of the pizza slice. So we built a perspective that talked to exactly that, that talked to that challenge that they had. It was a known problem at board level that they were discussing, and we came with a solution, and they couldn't work it out. And what was amazing was we spent myself and about 5 individuals in the deal team that we pulled together. Those days we were all on Google Hangouts working away together. We spent ages pulling this together. We made it look absolutely amazing. It looked beautiful, the business case we sent. And this was the first ever challenger perspective we put to them. Sent it to every single one in the exec of this organization, of this grocer. Nobody responded for 3 months. So this was in the March. And it was, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, I've gone to one account, single threaded account. We have no relationship with them. I've taken the shot. It's the most obvious, biggest problem that we can solve.
In the words of Love Island, you put all your eggs in one basket.
All my eggs were firmly in one basket. Yeah, absolutely that. I was done. And I remember nurseries had opened back up. I was picking my son up. We were in the car, and I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. And it was one of a senior marketer at the organization who'd taken my number off the email. Said, this business case you've sent our exec, and I'm like, I've got Jacob in the back, and he's like a noisy 3-year-old. I'm like, can I call you back in a minute? He's like, no. Where'd you get the numbers? Because we'd sent some numbers. And I said, we just made them up. I didn't quite say that, but I kind of did. I said, we just looked at your data, and we read your annual reports, and we looked at the opportunity you had, and we got there. They're really, really similar to the ones that we've been looking at recently, looking at the impact of what's happened in the pandemic. Like, can we have a conversation? And I was like, yes, we can. And it just went from there. And
yes.
I kid you not,
that
was about July. We closed that first land with that organization in the December.
Amazing. So it paid off. You
God.
held the line.
I wouldn't be talking to you about this if it hadn't. No, we did hold the line. And
that's such a great story.
And actually, just riffing on that for a second, you've asked me, you mentioned earlier about theatre. One of my favorite parts of that of that, one of the things that I really loved doing at Salesforce actually with these big win teams that we built was thinking about the customer meeting and was over prepping for every single interaction, because you've got time to do it when you focus, and it's a really important heavy lift activity. And creating customer theatre is a really, really, really important part of these deals. If you're going to go in and you're going to fix challenges at the board level, you have to operate like it's a board meeting you're running. So the prep that you do is critical. Pre-reads, briefs, make the decks or the presentations or the assets. For this particular one, we actually built a microsite and presented from the microsite.
Amazing.
Which they loved, which is really cool. Make it all about them, not about you. All those things we built, it's really prepped to within an inch of our life. So many different, got a bunch of execs from across our business come and like play their execs. So it'd be like a shadow exec for the meeting. So they then questions, role play the whole thing.
And the dress rehearsal.
Yeah, that's it. And this was all on Google Hangouts, because it was during the pandemic. So I'm in my shed at the end of the garden, like orchestrating all this stuff. It was so much fun. And then to see it come to life, to see it all play out, it's just the most amazing thing in the world. For me, that is, and watching the people in your win team delivering these amazing different, the different parts of the pitch, of the theatre, of the production, is so gratifying. It's so good. It's actually, funnily enough, that whole summer is the reason I moved into sales leadership, because I sat there and realised I can pull together teams of people and get them pointed in the right direction, and get them performing at their absolute best, get their their talents out of them, bring their strengths to life. And I watched us do that with this virtual team, and was just like, wow, this is the most cool thing. It was far, far, far more gratifying actually than the resulting commission check. That was lovely as well. But this stuff was really, really cool. And there's just something, it's like poetry when you see it go really well.
I was going to say, almost, I hear people say it's like a symphony when you see it all go to plan and everybody's playing their part right. But I love that analogy of treating it like theatre, because there is so much prep that needs to go into it. And sometimes people can think about the prep of the research and understanding the buyer, but actually when it comes down to the pitch, they maybe just go, oh, well, I've done this 100 times before.
We'll knock the deck out. Yeah, exactly. Take the last deck, copy and paste, change the whatever.
Exactly.
No.
Not telling people when to speak. And I think it's just, it's building that trust, isn't it? If somebody's watching something and like, right, everybody has a role to play in this, and they all know what they're doing, and they're all working in harmony.
They are. And it's about creativity within that as well. So when we were building this production, this big exec pitch, we had their CMO and a bunch of his team ready to hear our story. I'd use the word deliberately story. I bought in a storytelling consultant. So I found a guy inside Salesforce. His name's John Billett. He's brilliant, and he was our chief storyteller. Wow! So I brought him in to the team in our prep and said, "Help us tell this story really well."
That's amazing.
And I'm a massive believer in stories, by the way. Like, they literally have the power to change the world. If you were to ask me what's the one thing that someone watching this could do, take a really actual go and learn how to tell really good stories, like that is probably the most impactful thing you can do for your sales career, because people buy from people, yes, but people can relate to stories, and that's the really critical thing. They have, they evoke emotion, and emotion is what sells all the time. They can see themselves buying from you. They put themselves in the shoes of the people who became the heroes in your story.
Is there anything that you can share from that session on how to deliver a story in a really effective way?
Yeah, of course I can. The framework, really simple. I've used the same framework for almost every presentation I've done for a long, long time now, which is why, what, and how. Really simple. And our story framework followed exactly that. So we used the classic hero's journey. I don't know, are you familiar with hero's journey?
No.
Okay, so it's the Pixar model. They use it a lot as well. So anything you've watched, so like everything from Toy Story, all the others, they all follow this arc, which is called the hero's journey. So we use that, and it kind of it details the ups and the downs, and it's deliberately playing on people's emotion. The best example of seeing hero's journey in a non-Pixar sense is watch Steve Jobs's the keynote he did when he launched either the iPhone or the iPad. Watch both, and if you then, I think there is on YouTube a side by side with someone explaining the hero's journey at the same time.
Oh,
but
nice.
They used exactly the same thing there. So it's hero's journey. So it's make your customer's customer So that could be, in our case, it was someone buying groceries, a family buying groceries. It might be if you sell employee technology, it could be, the employee of the customer you're working with. Doesn't matter. Make somebody who isn't the buyer the hero of the story, and then follow this arc. Follow the ups and downs, follow the moments. And of course, the downs correspond with the things you can fix in the ups. And it is genuinely just, it's poetry. When you see it working, it's brilliant. You see people's brains going. The other part of storytelling, which a kind of framework, it's less a framework, more just really important to do, is you can tell a story to evoke emotion, and that works really well, but you have to back it with referenceability in B2B selling, right? So the classic thing to do is to learn, the customer stories your organization gets you to learn rote. That's fine if you want to do that. I'm always slightly skeptical when I see testimonials and things like that, because you're like, have they been elicited? Are they real? So what I do when I join any new organization, what I did when I joined Salesforce, I've been doing it in ServiceNow over the past few months as well, is just go and speak to the people who've done the cool deals. Go and ask who's doing the biggest, coolest stuff, and ask them how they do it and what they do and what the outcomes are, and get first-hand stories out of people's brains, and then figure out how they work, how they could work for you. Because what that does is it allows you to then customize it, personalize it to your audience. And I use the word audience very deliberately. Thinking audience like the theatre, not thinking audience like, just someone sit in front of you. Because then you can back that, you can take them on that emotional journey, but you can also, you bring it back to, and these are the, other organizations that looked and sounded like you. You don't even need to name them often, did this X, Y, and Z. And my last point on storytelling with you, for you, is the other really important thing you have to do in a story is make it a little bit fallible. So if I hear a customer story where everything's rosy, I am immediately skeptical. So I want to know, where did it go wrong? And if you can weave that in and then show how your organization, whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you do, helped, you're onto a winner. Because again, it becomes more real as soon as you introduce.
It's authentic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's authentic. Yeah.
And also, I think they know that it's not going to be plain sailing the whole way, and they want to know that they're going to be working with somebody that can go through those challenging times. And I mean, that really is why we created this channel, is we want to speak to people in this industry that have been through those ups and downs, be really authentic, share it, because there's nothing worse. And I think you can often look through rose-tinted glasses on LinkedIn and see all of the good things that are happening, which is great to see. But ultimately, people want to learn how to get better and be able to bounce back from that challenge. So if you're showing that in your story, it's going to, again, to the point of trust, build that.
Well, just to riff on that point around LinkedIn for a minute, because I did quite a bit of that as well.
I've noticed. Some great videos. Do watch them.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll pay you later. But one of the things that I think LinkedIn has really helped me with, and this is an interesting one for sellers. If you think about 1% of people create, about 5% contribute, and the rest kind of just consume, right? That's broadly it. There's a whole load of stuff there around, the opportunity for you to get your story out there very quickly because you're in a very small percentage. But actually, for me, the biggest benefit of LinkedIn is it's taught me how to write. Because I'm dyslexic. I'm horrific at writing. I think we talked about this before. Yeah, horrific. But by doing LinkedIn regularly over the past sort of probably decade or so now, I guess, but particularly focusing on it through the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've actually learned how to tell narrative better. I know the things that will press the buttons on LinkedIn. I know the things that will press the buttons with people when I tell stories in person.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you talked about there. It's authenticity. People will buy from people they can relate to. People will buy into stories that they feel are a bit of them. So if you can find ways to do that when you're producing that theatre, when you're producing the pitch for your, when you've been given an hour or whatever it is, I think that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Oh, love that. It's like Disney. Create that magic.
It is like Disney. It is. We can learn a lot from.
And like
from
you've been gifted that time, that hour. Use it wisely. Yeah. Make yourself memorable, and by making that magic, I think people will leave going, "Wow, that was really different."
Well, there's a really, really interesting point you make there. We have been gifted that hour, right? And the worst thing that can happen in that hour is that someone gets one of these out and starts to look. Because as soon as that happens, everyone else in the meeting room thinks that's an approval for them to start looking at their phones, and you lose attention immediately. Yeah. So it's your job from the opening hook, from the opening line, to catch, grab, and keep their attention with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So when it comes to writing that deck, because we often go back to PowerPoint, the last thing I'd suggest you do is talk about yourself at the start of the presentation. And here's a little top tip for you, because there's two little top tips for presentations that I always think about. It doesn't have to be for big deals, but it works, right? The first is, don't leave your pricing slide to the end. Get it up front, get it early, because it's the bit they're waiting for.
Yeah.
Right? And it's never a big reveal. It's never a number that's...
Drum roll, please.
Yeah, exactly. It's never a number they're happy with, whatever it is. Yeah. So always have the pricing slide early. And then for the business case, always have ranges. So I see lots and lots of business cases, have seen lots, have built lots, whatever, over the years, where there's a really big number and it's often very specific. It's the classic thing of like, oh, we can save you 122.5 million. It's like, what the hell have you got there? I don't know, pull that one out of thin air. But having spoken to lots of CFOs over the years, CFOs, COOs, they actually believe ranges. So if you say, we think we can deliver between 113 and 122.5 million or whatever, they're actually more likely to sit there and go, okay, how have you got to that number? And then they'll start to do it themselves in their head. And those are just two completely randomly. It doesn't have to be for big deals, works for anything, but those make a big difference. And again, it comes back to psychology and empathy. If you're sitting in the room, if you're, we all have to sit in hours and hours and hours and hours a week of meetings. You want to be engaged, and you want to be you want people to feel like they've put yourself in their shoes before coming into the room, because that's what experience is all about. And selling is an experience, just like everything else in life these days.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. This has
pleasure.
been so fascinating, and hopefully you've given people listening food for thought on how to really hunt those big deals and go for the full cookie. Who doesn't love a cookie? Why would you have a crumb when you could have a cookie?
Well, isn't that the point?
Exactly. As we end every episode on Sales Unfiltered, I would love to ask you, what is one challenge that you faced in your career or life that's really shaped you to where you are at this point?
Okay, so you told me I had to think about this and I completely forgot.
That's okay.
About whenever it was when we briefed a few months ago. And then you mentioned it before we spoke, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It's not a moment, it's a constant battle, if I'm honest. I don't feel like, don't worry, you're looking at me like we're stepping into the therapy chair at the moment.
Book out and tissues?
No, but I think this is really hopefully relatable to people. I have struggled with the challenge of imposter syndrome for my whole career. In whatever role I've done, I've always thought, why the hell have they asked me to do this? Why the hell am I being trusted to do this?
Really?
Yeah, constantly. And even down to like today, like it's something that's always been there. But I was really lucky to work with an absolutely phenomenal leader who became a really good friend, partner in crime when I did a startup before I joined Salesforce, actually. And I remember him saying to me at one point when I talked about it with him, first time I'd ever shared it with anyone. And he said, Ed, we're all flying the plane while building it. And I was like, that's such a beautiful way of saying it. And ever since I've started talking about it openly with people and just being a bit vulnerable on it, you find that most people struggle with it in one way or another. It's quite common. I mentioned it. My dad was an exec for a long, long time, worked in the oil industry, so completely different, oil and energy industry, completely different to what I do. And he's like, yeah, I had that too. Just didn't know what it was. It wasn't called imposter syndrome then. And it's just like that.
And didn't talk about my emotions either, probably.
No, probably not. But different. But that for me probably has been and continues to be one of the biggest challenges I have. And I suspect it probably always will be. But you know what? It's also a massive, massive superpower, because if you're vulnerable with people around you, you're vulnerable with your team, you're vulnerable with, your colleagues, then one, they can help you, and two, that they can, they might relate.
Thank you for sharing that.
There you go.
It's really different to hear men open up about that. And I think something that I would love for more men to feel comfortable with saying, and it's definitely being a female, a lot of women go through imposter syndrome and they talk about it quite openly, but you don't really see many men opening up about it. So it's nice to know that actually we're all human, everybody goes through it. Yeah. And maybe you just need to tap into that and realise that we can all support each other.
100%. And
it's okay to mess up and make mistakes, and you do deserve to be there, and you definitely deserve to be here because you've smashed it.
It's just that concept of like, I think we all do it. I think everyone everyone struggles. I think if you're not aware of it, you're probably not overly self-aware. I think more people are these days, which is good, because we are all talking about our emotions more and all that.
And if you're not feeling it as well, you're probably in the wrong career, because you're probably too confident that you feel you're good enough.
Well, or here's a take on it, which is interesting. If you're not feeling it, are you not stretching yourself? Because, and not everyone has to stretch themselves. I think there is a bit of a almost toxic culture about personal development and growth in some ways, because it's absolutely fine to just be cool and be doing your job. But for me, I love being uncomfortable. I love the discomfort that comes with learning new things. But the downside of that sometimes is, you can just be like, oh my God, am I really going to be able to do this? Is it, why have they given this to me? Why have they asked me to take this on? Why am I doing this? And as I say, if we don't talk about it more as a community, as all of us, then I guess by talking about it, we normalize it, don't we? Which is,
it's not a taboo.
Why I mention it? No, absolutely not. I could have given you a million other mistakes I've made.
I love this one. I think that was perfect.
I've made
Thank
tons,
you for sharing.
Yeah.
We'll do a whole other episode on the mistakes of Ed. Can't wait for that one. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming in. Really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. You've definitely given me a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure a lot of people could take what you've said today and put it into action. So thanks for coming on.
Perfect. My absolute pleasure. It's been really fun. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening. Check out the channel for more episodes like this one, and we'll see you next week.